After losing his wife suddenly, a father watches his twin daughters sink into deep silence. Months of intensive treatments fail against a void no one can reach, until a woman forgotten by the system gently ignites the spark of healing. Before we begin, become part of our family here on the channel. Subscribe now, leave a like, it helps our work immensely, and write in the comments which city you're watching from. I love knowing how far our stories reach. The return flight from Washington, D.C. landed at JFK at 8:20 p.m. Richard Morgan hung up the phone after confirming with his private driver that he was already on his way to the airport. 3 days of intense meetings with suppliers for his construction company had been productive, but he was anxious to get home. He missed Anne, his wife of 12 years, and the twins, Sophia and Helen, who would be turning 7 next month. While he waited for his luggage, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, is this Mr. Richard Morgan?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is Mount Sinai Hospital, Upper East Side Unit. You need to come here immediately, sir. It's about your wife, Anne Morgan." The world seemed to stop. Richard felt the ground give way beneath his feet. "What happened? Is she okay?" "Sir, I'd prefer to speak with you in person. Please come as quickly as possible." The grave tone of the voice on the other end of the line said it all. Richard dropped his suitcase on the floor and ran out of the terminal, his heart pounding. On the way to the hospital, he called the girl's nanny, but no one answered. He tried Anne's cell phone, voicemail. Arriving at the hospital, he was directed to a private room where the on-duty doctor was waiting for him. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a sorrowful expression, got straight to the point. "Mr. Morgan, I'm very sorry to have to give you this news. Your wife suffered a sudden cardiac arrest at home around 5 this afternoon. The paramedics arrived quickly, but we were unable to revive her. She didn't make it." The words echoed in Richard's mind, as if from a great distance. Anne, his Anne. At 34, always healthy, always radiant. How was this possible? "But doctor, she was fine. I spoke with her last night. Everything was normal." "Sometimes these things happen without warning, Mr. Morgan. A severe arrhythmia, a congenital problem that never manifested. We're investigating, but the important thing now is for you to know that she didn't suffer." Richard left the hospital like a ghost. The driver, sensing the gravity of the situation, offered to take him directly home to the Upper East Side. The entire way, Richard sat in silence, trying to process the reality. How would he explain to Sophia and Helen that Mommy wasn't coming home anymore? The house was strangely silent when he arrived. Vera, the nanny, opened the door with eyes swollen from crying. "Mr. Richard, what a tragedy. I didn't know how to tell the girls." "Where are they?" "In the living room, sir. They—" Vera hesitated, wiping her nose with a tissue. "They've been different since they found out. They haven't said a word. They won't eat, they won't move." Richard walked into the living room and felt his heart shatter. Sophia and Helen were sitting on the floor, side by side, hugging each other, staring into space. They were still wearing their school uniforms, but they looked like broken dolls. "Daddy's home, girls." No reaction, not even a blink. Richard knelt in front of them, trying to make eye contact. "Daughters, Daddy's here. Let's talk." Nothing. It was as if he didn't exist. Vera approached, whispering, "They were like this when I got here. The neighbor, Mrs. Miller, is the one who called 911. She said she found the girls this way when the firefighters broke down the door, as if their world had just stopped." The following days were a blur of pain and despair. Anne's funeral took place on a rainy Wednesday morning. Richard decided not to bring the girls, who remained in that almost catatonic state. They didn't eat properly, didn't speak, didn't react to anything. They seemed to have disconnected from reality. Worried, Richard sought medical help. The girls' pediatrician, Dr. Peterson, examined them thoroughly. "It's severe psychological trauma, Richard. They witnessed something their young minds can't process. I'm going to refer you to a specialist." That's how he met Dr. Frederick Adler, a renowned child psychiatrist with an office in Midtown Manhattan, a man in his 50s with perfectly combed grey hair, an impeccable suit, and an imposing posture. His deep voice conveyed authority when he spoke about the case. "Mr. Morgan, What your daughters are facing is a complex case of dissociative trauma. They've disconnected from reality as a protective mechanism. It's a severe case that will require specialized and intensive intervention. Doctor, will they recover? With the proper treatment, yes, but it will be a long and costly process. We'll need daily sessions, neurological monitoring, possible medications, and experimental therapies. My team is the most advanced in the country for this type of case. Richard didn't hesitate. Money was not an issue. His construction company was thriving, and he would do anything for his daughters. In a few days, the house was transformed. Dr. Adler set up a veritable clinical facility on the top floor. Nurses rotated in shifts, heart monitors were installed, and electroencephalography equipment arrived in huge boxes. Sophia and Helen were subjected to daily tests, therapy sessions that lasted for hours with electrodes attached to their little heads. It's necessary to monitor their brain activity constantly, Dr. Adler explained. We are mapping the areas affected by the trauma to direct the treatment. But no matter how sophisticated the medical apparatus was, the girls remained the same. Quiet, distant, as if trapped in an invisible bubble. They ate only when forced, didn't play, didn't smile. They were like two flesh-and-blood statues that moved only when absolutely necessary. Richard was exhausted. Between work, which he couldn't completely abandon, and his daughter's medical routine, his life had turned into chaos. Vera did her best, but the house needed more care. The kitchen sink piled up with dishes, laundry stacked up, and the cleaning was neglected. It was Vera who made the suggestion. "Mr. Richard, you need more help around here. I can't manage everything and still take care of the girls. How about we hire someone else, just for the general cleaning and organizing?" Richard agreed immediately. Vera knew a trustworthy agency and would handle the selection. A few days later, she returned with a recommendation. "I found a very good young woman, Mr. Richard. Beatrice Shaw, 28 years old. She has experience with family, homes, and really needs the work. She seems serious and dedicated." "All right, Vera. You're the expert on these things. You can hire her." Richard was so submerged in his own pain and worry for his daughters that he barely paid attention to the details. He just wanted the house to function so he could focus on Sophia and Helen's recovery. The following Monday, Beatrice Shaw showed up for work. She was a woman of average height, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and discreet, clean clothes. There was something in her eyes, a mix of determination and melancholy that Richard noticed quickly but couldn't decipher. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan. I'm Beatrice. I'm here to help with the house." "Welcome. Vera will explain everything to you. I need to leave for the office, but if you need anything, speak with her." Beatrice nodded and followed Vera to get acquainted with the house. When they passed the living room where Sophia and Helen were sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys they didn't touch, Beatrice paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the two small girls, so quiet, so absent. Something in her chest tightened. She knew that. Look, she had seen it before in other places, under other circumstances. She knew what it meant when a child shut themselves off from the world like that. "His daughters," she murmured to Vera. "Poor things. They lost their mother 3 months ago. They're being treated by a very important doctor, but they're not getting any better. They just sit there all day, not talking, not playing. It breaks your heart." Beatrice said nothing, but she continued to watch the girls for a few more seconds. There was something familiar in that scene, something that stirred an old pain in her own chest. In that first week, she carried out her duties with silent efficiency. She cleaned, organized, did the laundry, and prepared simple meals. But whenever she passed the living room where Sophia and Helen spent their days, she would stop for a moment to observe them. The girls never seemed to notice her presence, not hers nor anyone else's. They were lost somewhere far away, where the pain couldn't reach them, but where life also couldn't enter. Beatrice understood that place. She had been there once herself. Beatrice Shaw carried an invisible weight that no one around her could see. During her first few days at the Morgan house, she performed her tasks mechanically as if on autopilot. But whenever she passed the living room where Sophia and Helen remained seated, something inside her stirred. She knew that lost gaze, that total absence. She had seen it in dozens of children during the 5 years she worked as a pediatric nurse at St. Barnabas Hospital in the Bronx. Children who had been through traumas, through pains their little hearts couldn't bear. And she also knew that most of the time it wasn't medicine or equipment that brought them back to the world. It was affection. It was human presence. It was someone who saw them not as patients but as people. Beatrice was only 23 when she graduated from nursing school. She was passionate about her profession, especially caring for children. She had a natural gift, a special connection with her young patients. They trusted her, smiled when she entered the room, and were calmed by her gentle voice. Everything changed one March afternoon 2 years ago. It had been a busy day at the hospital. A double shift, many admissions, the staff was overwhelmed. Beatrice was caring for a 4-year-old boy with severe pneumonia, little Gabriel, when she received an order from Dr. Frederick Adler to administer a medication. Yes, the same Dr. Adler who was now treating Sophia and Helen. At the time, he was the head of pediatrics at St. Barnabas, a respected man with an authoritarian voice and a difficult temperament. When he gave an order, no one questioned it. Nurse Shaw, administer 10 milligrams of morphine to Gabriel. The boy is in pain. Beatrice looked at the prescription, and something didn't add up. 10 milligrams was far too high a dose for a 4-year-old child. The correct dose would be 3 milligrams at most. Doctor, shouldn't we review the dosage? For a child this age. Nurse, I am the doctor here. Do as I say. Beatrice hesitated. Her entire training screamed that this was wrong, but Dr. Adler stared at her with that intimidating gaze that brooked no argument. It was her first year at the hospital. She was new, inexperienced. Who was she to question a doctor with decades of experience? With trembling hands, she prepared the injection. 10 milligrams of morphine. She administered it to little Gabriel, who looked at her, with trusting eyes, not knowing it would be the last time he would ever smile. Within 15 minutes, the boy went into respiratory arrest. The emergency team fought for 2 hours, but they couldn't save him. Gabriel died of a morphine overdose. The internal investigation was swift and brutal. Dr. Adler claimed he had prescribed 3 milligrams, not 10. He presented an altered prescription as proof. He said that Nurse Shaw had misread it and administered a lethal dose. Beatrice tried to defend herself, but it was her word against that of a renowned doctor. There were no witnesses. The hallway security cameras were conveniently malfunctioning that day. Within a week, she was fired for gross negligence. Within a month, her nursing license was revoked by the professional board. Within 3 months, she was blacklisted from every hospital in New York. No one would hire her to work in healthcare again. Little Gabriel's family sued the hospital. Beatrice was named as a defendant in the lawsuit. She had to sell the apartment she had financed, using all her savings on lawyers. In the end, despite being innocent, she had to pay a settlement that left her in debt for years. Her life fell apart. The profession she loved lost, her reputation destroyed. Colleagues who once respected her now avoided her as if she were contagious. Some friends disappeared, others whispered behind her back. Beatrice fell into a deep depression. She spent months locked in her home, the small studio apartment she rented in the Bronx after losing her condo. She couldn't sleep properly, had nightmares about Gabriel, about his trusting gaze the last time they saw each other. Her recovery was slow and painful. Gradually, she found sporadic work as a cleaner, an elderly caregiver, a housekeeper, always with false names on her references, always hiding her past. She learned to be invisible, not to stand out, to go unnoticed. But the pain never completely went away, and the guilt, even knowing it wasn't her responsibility, continued to eat away at her. That's why, upon seeing Sophia and Helen in that state, she felt a tightness in her chest. She recognized their pain because she carried her own. She knew what it was to disconnect from the world when it became impossible to bear. At the end of her second week working at the Morgan House on a Thursday afternoon, Beatrice was vacuuming the living room when she noticed the noise was bothering Dr. Adler, who was conducting a session with the girls upstairs. She turned off the vacuum and stood there, watching Sophia and Helen sitting on the floor. They wore those electrodes on their heads, wires connected to a machine that emitted constant beeps. They looked like 2 broken little dolls. Without thinking, Beatrice began to hum a song her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a child. Little fish, where do you go? I'm off to the pond to play with my friends. It was a simple, gentle melody that always calmed her as a little girl. She continued humming as she folded some clothes on the sofa, trying not to draw attention. Suddenly, something made her stop. When she looked up, she saw Sophia looking directly at her. It wasn't the usual empty gaze. It was a curious, present, living look, as if, for the first time in months, the girl had truly seen someone. Beatrice froze, unsure of what to do. Sophia kept looking, and now Helen had also turned her head in her direction. Little fish, where do you go? Beatrice whispered again, her voice barely audible. Helen moved her head slightly, as if trying to listen better. Beatrice felt tears welling in her eyes, but she didn't stop singing. It was as if a window had opened in a room that had been sealed for months. When she finished the song, both girls were still looking at her. They didn't speak, they didn't smile, but they were there, present, alive. "Hi," Beatrice murmured, slowly crouching to their level. "Did you like the song?" Sophia blinked slowly. Helen wiggled her fingers slightly. They were minimal gestures, almost imperceptible, but to Beatrice they were like fireworks. She knew something had changed in that moment. In the following days, Beatrice began to pay more attention to the girls. Whenever she passed through the living room and they were alone, she would softly hum the same song, and she always noticed small reactions, a gaze that lingered a little longer, a breath that grew calmer, an almost imperceptible movement. A week later, while cleaning the dining room, Beatrice noticed that Sophia was following her with her eyes as she moved around the house. It was subtle, but it was happening. "For you can see me, can't you?" Beatrice murmured as she passed by her. "You're in there, just waiting for the right moment to come out." Sophia didn't answer, but Beatrice was sure she had understood. Richard was so absorbed between work and meetings with Dr. Adler that he didn't notice these small changes. Vera, always busy with the girls' medications and basic care, didn't notice either. But Beatrice saw, and with each passing day, she felt that Sophia and Helen were slowly returning to the world. It was on a Saturday morning that the first major breakthrough happened. Richard had left early to play tennis at the club, trying to relieve stress. Vera was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Dr. Adler wouldn't arrive until the afternoon for the weekend session. Beatrice was in the living room organizing magazines on the coffee table when Sophia slowly stood up from the floor where she had been sitting for hours. Beatrice pretended not to be paying attention, but she watched everything from the corner of her eye. Sophia walked slowly to where Beatrice was and stood beside her, just watching. "Hi, Sophia," Beatrice said softly, without stopping what she was doing. "Good morning." "To you too." The girl didn't respond, but she didn't move away. After a few minutes, Beatrice felt something touch her blouse. It was Sophia's tiny hand, gently touching the fabric of her sleeve. Beatrice's heart leaped, but she remained calm. "Do you want to help me organize the magazines?" she asked quietly. Sophia didn't answer verbally, but when Beatrice held out a magazine to her, the girl took it. It was the first voluntary physical contact Sophia had made with another person since losing her mother. Helen, seeing her sister move, also got up and walked slowly towards them. She stood on the other side of Beatrice, just watching. The three of them stood there for almost an hour, organizing magazines in silence. Beatrice hummed softly from time to time, and the girls seemed to relax at the sound of her voice. When they heard Richard's car pulling into the garage, Sophia and Helen quickly returned to their usual spot, sitting on the floor as if nothing had happened. Richard came in, sweaty from tennis, greeted Beatrice quickly, and went to take a shower. He didn't notice anything different, but for Beatrice everything had changed. She knew that. Sophia and Helen were beginning to trust her, and more importantly, they were starting to want to come back to the world of the living. That night, as she tidied up the kitchen after dinner, Beatrice reflected on what was happening. The girls were responding to something that the medical equipment and Dr. Adler's sessions couldn't offer: simple, genuine human connection. She had no training in psychiatry, she didn't understand complex traumas or experimental therapies. But she knew deep in her heart that Sophia and Helen didn't need more machines or medications. They needed to feel safe again, loved again, seen again as children and not as patients. And for some reason she couldn't fully explain, they were beginning to find that safety in her. Perhaps it was because Beatrice had also been lost once. Perhaps because she understood what it was like to have your world collapse around you and need to hide somewhere safe within yourself. Or perhaps it was simply because, when she looked at Sophia and Helen, she didn't see symptoms or diagnoses. She saw two scared little girls who needed to know there was still kindness and care in the world even after so much pain. As she finished putting away the dishes, Beatrice made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to help these children find their way back home. To life. To the joy every child deserved to have. She didn't yet know that the man responsible for the tragedy of her own life was the same one treating Sophia and Helen. That discovery was still to come, and it would change everything. 3 weeks after Sophia's first contact with Beatrice, the small changes began to become more evident. It was like watching flowers bloom in slow motion. Sophia was the first to show clearer progress. She started following Beatrice around the house with her eyes, would turn her head when she heard her voice, and sometimes stood near her while she did her chores. Helen, always shyer, watched everything from a distance, but she also showed signs that she was paying attention. Beatrice had created a special routine. Whenever Dr. Adler wasn't in the house and the girls were alone in the living room, she would hum soft songs while she worked. She started with Little Fish, but then included other childhood songs. Ring Around the Rosie, Other Itsy Bitsy Spider, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. The girls seemed to recognize each melody, and Beatrice noticed how they relaxed when she sang. One Tuesday morning, while Vera was out buying medicine at the pharmacy and Richard was in a meeting at the office, something surprising happened. Beatrice was cleaning the living room when she started humming Ring Around the Rosie. Suddenly, she heard a faint voice, almost a whisper. A pocket full of posies. It was Helen. Beatrice stopped immediately, her heart racing. Helen had spoken. For the first time in 4 months, one of the girls had said something. Helen, Beatrice whispered, slowly crouching down near her. Did you sing with me? Helen looked at her with those big, dark eyes, but said nothing more. She just gave a slight nod. Do you want me to keep singing? Another almost imperceptible nod. Beatrice continued the song and Helen whispered a few stray words. Sophia, seeing her sister participate, also began to move her lips, though no sound came out. When Vera returned from the pharmacy, she found the 3 of them sitting on the living room floor, Beatrice humming softly, and the girls paying attention in a way they hadn't for months. Wow, what a beautiful scene, Vera said, smiling. It's been a long time since I've seen them so present. Beatrice just smiled, but inside she was beaming. She knew she was on the right path. In the following days, the progress accelerated. Sophia started nodding her head again when someone spoke to her. Helen would whisper a few words now and then. Both began to eat a little better, especially when Beatrice was nearby at mealtimes. One Thursday afternoon, Richard came home earlier than usual. He had cancelled a meeting because he felt guilty for spending so much time away while his daughters needed him. As he entered the living room, prepared to find Sophia and Helen in their usual catatonic state, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Laughter. Children's laughter, coming from upstairs. Richard took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. He followed the sound to the girls' room and stopped at the door, unable to believe his eyes. Sophia and Helen were playing doctor with Beatrice. They had put a makeshift apron on her made from a towel and were examining her hands with plastic. Toys. They were laughing, talking softly. They seemed normal. They looked like the daughters he knew before the tragedy. Richard stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down his face, unable to move. It was the first time he had heard his daughters laugh since losing Anne. The first time he had seen them playing, interacting, being children again. "Daddy!" Sophia shouted when she saw him. She ran to him and threw herself into his arms. Helen followed right behind. Richard hugged them as if he would never let go, crying with emotion. "My girls," he repeated through his tears. "My girls are back." Beatrice stood in the corner of the room watching the reunion with an emotional smile. She tried to slip out discreetly to give the family privacy, but Richard called her. "Beatrice, wait, please." She turned, a little embarrassed. "I don't know how to thank you," Richard said, still holding his daughters. "I don't know what you did, but they're back." "Mr. Morgan, I just sang some songs with them. We played a little, nothing special." "Nothing special. Beatrice, you accomplished in a few weeks what months of treatment couldn't. You brought my daughters back to life." That night, after Sophia and Helen were asleep, in their own room for the first time since the tragedy, Richard called Dr. Adler to share the good news. "Doctor, you won't believe it. The girls are talking, playing, laughing. It's a miracle." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Morgan, that's interesting. But we need to be cautious with such sudden changes. Sometimes what appears to be progress can actually be an even more complex defense mechanism." "What do you mean, Doctor?" "I need to examine the girls immediately. And another thing, you mentioned the housekeeper has been close to them. That could be problematic." "Problematic, Doctor? It was precisely after Beatrice started interacting with them that they improved. That's exactly what concerns me. Traumatized children can develop dysfunctional bonds with figures who represent a false sense of security. This can severely interfere with long-term treatment." Richard fell silent, confused. "Doctor, I don't understand. They are clearly getting better." "Mr. Morgan, trust me. I have decades of experience with these types of cases. I will be there tomorrow morning for an emergency evaluation, and I suggest you limit this employee's contact with the children until we are certain there are no risks." That night, Dr. Adler couldn't sleep. The sudden improvement of the Morgan girls bothered him deeply, but not for the reasons he had explained to Richard. The truth was, the case was proving to be extremely lucrative. The experimental treatments he was administering cost thousands of dollars a week. He had rented equipment, a team of outsourced nurses, and imported medications. Furthermore, he intended to use the twins case in a scientific paper he was writing on severe childhood trauma. If the girls recovered so quickly, and through simple methods that didn't involve technology or medication, his entire scheme would collapse. Worse still, it would call into question the necessity of all the expensive procedures he had been implementing. He needed to regain control of the situation. The next morning, Dr. Adler arrived at the Morgan house earlier than usual, carrying a thick folder of documents. He greeted Richard coldly and asked to examine the girls in private. Sophia and Helen, who were having breakfast with Beatrice and laughing at a story she was telling, became visibly tense when they saw the doctor. The atmosphere changed instantly. After the examination, Dr. Adler called Richard into his study for a private conversation. "Mr. Morgan, my suspicions are confirmed. The girls are showing signs of problematic emotional transference. They are replacing the lost maternal figure with the housekeeper, which could create an even more severe psychological dependency." "Doctor, I don't understand. They are clearly better." "Apparently, yes, but it's an artificial improvement based on a dependent relationship. If something happens to this woman, or if she leaves suddenly, the girl's trauma could multiply exponentially." Richard shook his head, confused. "So what do you suggest?" Dr. Adler opened the folder he had brought and took out some papers. "Mr. Morgan, I need to tell you something about your employee. I ran a background check for security purposes, given her close contact with your vulnerable daughters." Richard sat up straighter in his chair. Beatrice Shaw was once a registered nurse. She was fired from St. Barnabas Hospital 2 years ago for medical negligence that resulted in the death of a child, a medication overdose she administered incorrectly. Richard's world seemed to spin. "What?" "It's all documented here. She lost her professional license, was sued by the victim's family. A 4-year-old child died because of her mistake." Richard took the papers with trembling hands. They were copies of court filings, disciplinary reports, newspaper articles. It all looked official. It all looked real. "Doctor, this can't be right. She's so careful with the girls, so gentle." "That's exactly what worries me. People who have made grave mistakes with children sometimes try to redeem themselves by creating obsessive bonds with other children. It can be dangerous. Richard was in shock. How had he been so blind? How had he not checked her references properly? What should I do? Mr. Morgan, as a doctor and as someone who genuinely cares for Sophia and Helen's well-being, I strongly recommend that you dismiss this employee. Immediately. Every day she remains here could be compromising your daughter's real recovery. Richard was silent for several minutes, staring at the documents in his hand. But, Doctor, if I fire her, the girls might regress. Mr. Morgan, trust the scientific process. Trust medicine. We will resume the proper treatment, and I guarantee your daughters will recover the right way permanently, without any problematic dependencies. When Richard left the study, he had made a decision. He couldn't risk his daughter's safety. If Beatrice had really caused a child's death, how could he trust her to care for Sophia and Helen? He found Beatrice in the kitchen preparing lunch. Vera was in the backyard hanging clothes, and the girls were playing in the living room. Beatrice, I need to talk to you. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Something in his tone put her on alert. Yes, Mr. Morgan. Is it true that you used to work as a nurse, and that you were fired for a mistake that caused a child's death? Beatrice felt the floor drop out from under her. Her past had found her again. Mr. Morgan, I can explain. Is it true or not? It's true I was a nurse, and it's true a child died, but it wasn't my mistake. I can explain everything. Beatrice, how could you hide this from me? My daughters, vulnerable, traumatized, and you hid the fact that you were involved in the death of a child. Mr. Morgan, please, let me explain what really happened. No, Beatrice. I trusted you. My daughters trusted you. And you lied from day one. Tears began to stream down Beatrice's face. I didn't lie, sir. I just didn't tell you because I knew no one would give me a chance if they knew. But I swear on everything holy, I did not kill that child. I was used as a scapegoat. Beatrice, I can't take your word for it anymore. I have to think of my daughters. Richard took a deep breath, gathering the strength for what he had to say. You're dismissed. I want you out of my house today. Beatrice felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach, not because of losing the job, she had lost many, but because of Sophia and Helen. They were getting better, they were coming back to life. And now, Mr. Morgan, the girls, and they're making so much progress. Dr. Adler said it's a false improvement based on a problematic dependency, that it could be dangerous for them in the long run. Beatrice understood everything in that moment. Dr. Adler, the same man who had destroyed her life, was now destroying it again. And worse, he was using Sophia and Helen as pawns in his game. But Richard wouldn't believe her. Not now. Not with all those documents as proof against her. Can I say goodbye? To them? Richard hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. Dr. Adler said it's better to avoid traumatic goodbyes, that it could be worse for them. Beatrice nodded, unable to speak. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. As she was leaving, she heard Sophia's voice shouting from upstairs, Auntie B, come play with us. That's what they had started calling her, Auntie B. Beatrice paused for a moment at the door, closed her eyes tightly, and left without looking back. She didn't see Richard wipe away a tear as he realized he might be making the biggest mistake of his life. The first night without Beatrice was a nightmare. Sophia and Helen asked for her all day long. Where's Auntie B? When is she coming back? Why did she leave without saying goodbye? Richard tried to explain that she had to travel, that a job had come up in another city, but the girls didn't accept the vague answers. At bedtime, they refused to go to their room. They sat on the stairs, waiting. Auntie B always sang to us before bed, Sophia said, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't really leave, Daddy. She just went out to buy something. Richard felt his heart break. He had to carry both girls to their room one at a time as they cried out for Beatrice. The next morning, when he came down for breakfast, he found Sophia and Helen sitting on the living room floor, in the same position as months before, quiet, absent, staring into nothingness. Girls, let's have breakfast. No response. It was as if they had reverted to their previous state, as if all the progress of the past few weeks had been just a dream. Vera tried to cheer them, up with games, but they didn't react. She offered their favorite toys, but they didn't even look at them. She tried singing the songs Beatrice sang, but her voice didn't have the same magical effect. On the second day without Beatrice, Sophia and Helen stopped eating again. On the third day, they returned to complete silence. By the fourth day, it was as if the last few months of progress had never happened. Richard was desperate. He called Dr. Adler on the first morning. "Doctor, the girls have completely regressed. They're exactly as they were before." "Mr. Morgan, that was to be expected. It's what I warned you about regarding the problematic dependency. Now we can resume the proper treatment without external interference." But as the days passed and the girls showed no improvement, Richard began to question whether he had made the right decision. Dr. Adler increased the frequency of the sessions, introduced new medications, and brought in even more sophisticated equipment, but nothing worked. A week after Beatrice's departure, while organizing papers in his study, Richard found a folder he didn't remember seeing before. It was tucked between other medical documents, almost hidden. Inside the folder was a report bearing the letterhead of Dr. Marina Campbell, a child psychiatrist from New York Presbyterian Hospital. The document was dated 7 months ago, 2 months after the girls had started treatment with Dr. Adler. Richard began to read, and he felt the blood run cold in his veins. Psychiatric evaluation. Patients: Sophia and Helen Morgan. After a detailed analysis of the patient's condition, I conclude that this is a case of acute psychological trauma resulting from sudden maternal loss. The condition is reversible through supportive emotional therapy, a nurturing environment, and the presence of stable caregiving figures. I do not recommend invasive treatments, psychotropic medications, or experimental procedures for this case. The patients have the capacity for natural recovery through a secure emotional bond and supportive psychological counseling. Prognosis: excellent, with recovery expected within 3 to 6 months through appropriate emotional care. I am forwarding these conclusions to Dr. Frederick Adler for his information and re-evaluation of the treatment protocol. Dr. Marina Campbell, NYS license, 89456. Richard read the document 3 times, unable to fully process what he was seeing. This report had been written 7 months ago. 7 months. And Dr. Adler had never mentioned its existence. With trembling hands, Richard picked up the phone and called New York Presbyterian Hospital. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Marina Campbell, please." "1 moment, I'll transfer you to her office." A few minutes later, a female voice answered. "Dr. Campbell, good afternoon." "Doctor, this is Richard Morgan. You evaluated my twin daughters a few months ago." "Ah, yes, Sophia and Helen. How are they? I hope Dr. Adler followed my recommendations." Richard felt his throat go dry. "Doctor, what recommendations exactly?" "Well, Mr. Morgan, as I explained in the report I sent, your daughters didn't need complex treatments. Their trauma was acute, but with excellent potential for recovery through affectionate care. I recommended discontinuing the invasive procedures and focusing on supportive emotional therapy." "Doctor, I've never seen this report." There was silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean you've never seen it? I sent it directly to Dr. Adler over half a year ago with a copy for you." "I never received anything." "Mr. Morgan, this is very serious. That report would have completely changed your daughter's treatment. What has Dr. Adler been doing with them all these months?" Richard explained the entire medical setup. At home, the equipment, the medications, the daily procedures. "My God," the doctor whispered. "Mr. Morgan, all of that was completely unnecessary and potentially harmful. Your daughters could have recovered naturally months ago." Richard hung up the phone, feeling as though the world was collapsing again. Dr. Adler had deliberately hidden a medical report that could have changed everything. His daughters had suffered months of unnecessary treatments for what reason? That same afternoon, he hired a private investigator. He wanted to know everything about Dr. Frederick Adler, his career, his professional conduct, his other patients. What he discovered in a week of investigation was shocking. The investigator, a former police officer named Robert Silver, delivered an extensive report on the doctor. He had spoken with former employees of hospitals where Adler had worked, reviewed ethical complaints, and analyzed patterns in his treatments. Mr. Morgan, Dr. Frederick Adler has a troubling history. In the last 5 years, at least a dozen families have filed complaints against him for unnecessary or excessively expensive treatments. Most didn't go forward because he has a very good legal team and the cases are technically complex. What kind of complaints? Exaggerated diagnoses, unapproved experimental treatments, inappropriate medication. Dosages, procedures that extend far beyond what is necessary, always with patients from high-income families. Robert showed him a folder full of documents. But the worst case I found was that of a nurse who worked with him at St. Barnabas Hospital, a woman named Beatrice Shaw. Richard felt his stomach turn. Beatrice Shaw? Yes. According to the documents I obtained, she tried to warn him about a dosage error Dr. Adler was making with a child. Instead of admitting his mistake, he forged the medical prescription and blamed her. The nurse was fired, lost her license, was sued. Her life was destroyed to protect his reputation. Richard was pale. Are you sure about this? Mr. Morgan, I gained access to the hospital's internal archives through a contact. The original prescriptions are still there, in the dead files. You can see where they were altered. Dr. Adler changed 3 mg to 10 mg after the child died, to make it look like the nurse had administered an overdose. My God! And there's more. Speaking with others who worked with him, I found out that this Beatrice Shaw was considered one of the best pediatric nurses at the hospital. She had never made a mistake, was beloved by the children and their families. It made no sense for her to make such a basic error. Richard was in a state of shock. Beatrice had been telling the truth. She was innocent, and he had sent her away based on the lies of the very man who had destroyed her life before. Robert, I need all the evidence you can get on this nurse's case. Original documents, witnesses, everything. I'm already on it, sir. But may I ask why this specific case is so important? Because that nurse, she was taking care of my daughters, and they were getting better with her. I fired her because I believed Dr. Adler's lies. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He went up to the girls' room several times to watch them sleep. Sophia and Helen looked so fragile, so vulnerable. And he had allowed them to be subjected to months of unnecessary treatments due to the greed and ambition of an unscrupulous man. Worse still, he had sent away the only person who was truly helping them. The next day, Robert brought more evidence. Documents from the State Medical Board showing other investigations against Adler. Financial reports, indicating he earned commissions on the equipment rented for home treatments. Recordings of phone calls where he instructed suppliers on how to inflate the costs of procedures. Mr. Morgan, Dr. Frederick Adler isn't just an incompetent doctor. He's a criminal. He uses the vulnerability of families in moments of desperation to enrich himself. Robert, I want you to compile all of this into a complete dossier. I want every document, every piece of evidence, every witness. I'm going to end this man's career. And what about Nurse Shaw? Richard sighed deeply. I need to find her. I need to apologize. And I need to bring her back to my daughters. That same afternoon, Richard confronted Dr. Adler. He said nothing about his discoveries, just asked casually, Doctor, did you ever know a nurse named Beatrice Shaw at St. Barnabas Hospital? He saw the doctor's face pale for an instant before he composed himself. Vaguely. Why do you ask? No reason. Just curious. But that reaction was enough to confirm everything. Dr. Adler knew exactly who Beatrice was and what he had done to her. That night, Richard made a decision. He picked up the phone and called the best criminal law firm in New York City. He hired a team of 5 lawyers specializing in crimes against public health. He also hired forensic accountants to analyze all the payments made to Dr. Adler and his network of suppliers. He wanted every penny back with interest, and he hired 3 more private investigators to compile evidence on all the other patients Adler had harmed. Dr. Frederick Adler had no idea, but his life was about to completely unravel. Richard spent the rest of the night beside his daughters, who slept restlessly, whispering Auntie B in their dreams. In the morning, he would go out to find Beatrice and beg for her forgiveness. But before that, he needed to ensure that the man responsible for so much suffering would pay for every tear he had caused. Finding Beatrice wasn't difficult. She was working as a cleaner for a janitorial company in the Bronx, taking 3 buses every day to get to work, and living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the borough. Richard found her through the agency, where Vera had originally gotten her information. The agency's owner, Mrs. Connolly, a 70-year-old woman who had been running the family business for decades, initially refused to give him the address. "Mr. Morgan, Beatrice is a good girl who's been through a lot. I won't expose her if you're just going to cause more trouble. Mrs. Connolly, I need to apologize to her, and my daughters need her back." The old woman studied him with a penetrating gaze for a few minutes. "You let her go because of that story from the hospital, didn't you? I knew this would happen one day. It always does." "You knew her story?" "Of course I did. Beatrice told me everything the first day she came here looking for work. Cried right in front of me, showed me the papers, explained how she was made a scapegoat. A terrible injustice." "Then why did you recommend her for my home?" "Because I know people, son. I know good people and bad people. Beatrice is good people, always has been. What they did to her was a wickedness beyond words." Mrs. Connolly gave him the address but warned, "If you hurt that girl again, you'll have to answer to me." Richard went to Beatrice's apartment on a Saturday afternoon. It was a simple building in the Bronx, with peeling paint and small windows. He climbed 3 flights of stairs to find the door with the number he was looking for. When Beatrice opened the door and saw him standing there, her face went pale. "Mr. Morgan." "Beatrice, May I come in? I need to talk to you." She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. The apartment was tiny, clean, with simple furniture and a small altar with lit candles on a shelf. "Beatrice, I came to ask for your forgiveness." She looked at him, confused. "Forgiveness for what?" "For not believing you. For sending you away without hearing your side of the story. For destroying your chance to work with children again." Richard told her everything. The discovery of Dr. Campbell's hidden report, the investigation into Dr. Adler, the evidence that she had been wronged at the hospital. Beatrice listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. "I knew it," she whispered when he finished. "I always knew the truth would come out one day. Beatrice, my daughters, they've completely regressed since you left. They're just like they were before, or worse. They need you. Mr. Morgan, Beatrice, I'm begging you. Come home. Come back to them." Beatrice wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "The girl, how are they?" "Lost, empty. They call your name in their sleep. They ask for you every day. They've stopped eating properly again. They don't talk. They don't play. It's as if all the joy you brought was just a dream." Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment. "And Dr. Adler? He's going to pay for everything he's done. To you, to my daughters, to all the other families. I have lawyers, investigators, accountants on the case. He's going to prison. He'll lose his license. He'll pay back every cent he stole." Richard took Beatrice's hands in his. "But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is Sophia and Helen. They need their Auntie B." Beatrice started to cry again. "They call me Auntie B? It's how they always talk about you. Where's Auntie B? Is Auntie B coming back? Auntie B promised to sing to us." "Mr. Morgan, I'm so afraid I won't be able to help them again. What if they don't respond? What if I don't know what to do?" "Beatrice, you will. You always did. It's a gift you have." Richard paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I lost my wife. I thought I was going to lose my daughters too. You brought them back to me. You saved my family." Beatrice looked at the altar on the shelf, where there was a small photo of a child. "Is that Gabriel?" Richard asked softly. "Yes. I light a candle for him every day, and I ask for his forgiveness, even though I know it wasn't my fault. Beatrice, Gabriel didn't die because of you, and Sophia and Helen are alive because of you." That afternoon, Richard brought Beatrice back home, but first they made a special stop. They bought ingredients to bake cookies, paints for art projects, and seeds to plant flowers in the garden. Simple things, but full of meaning. When they arrived at the house on the Upper East Side, Richard parked outside and called Vera. "Vera, can you bring the girls to the living room window?" A few minutes later, Sophia and Helen appeared at the window. When they saw Beatrice getting out of the car, they started shouting and banging on the glass. Auntie B, Daddy brought Auntie B back." They ran to the door, before Beatrice even reached it. When she walked in, they threw themselves into her arms, crying, laughing, talking all at once. "Auntie B, you left without saying goodbye." "We waited for you to come back." "Daddy said you went on a trip, but we knew you wouldn't really leave." Beatrice knelt on the living room floor, hugging the two girls, crying along with them. "I missed you both so much. Are you going to leave again, Auntie B?" "Never again, my loves. Never again." That night, the house came alive again. Sophia and Helen ate a proper dinner for the first time in 2 weeks. They played, laughed, and told Beatrice everything that had happened in her absence. At bedtime, she sang every song they requested: Little Fish, Ring Around the Rosie, and even some new ones she had learned just for them. When the girls finally fell asleep, Richard and Beatrice talked in the living room. "Beatrice, I want you to know that things are going to be different now. You're not going to be an employee here anymore. You're going to be part of the family. Mr. Morgan, and I want to help you clear your name. I have the best lawyers in New York working on Dr. Adler's case. They're going to include your lawsuit in the investigation. You'll get your license back if you want it." Beatrice was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Morgan, I've learned a lot in these past 2 years. I've learned that I don't need a title or a degree to care for children with love. Sophia and Helen taught me that what truly heals isn't medicine or equipment, it's affection. So you'll stay?" "I'll stay, but not as an employee, as someone who loves these girls and wants to see them grow up happy." 3 months later, the scandal involving Dr. Frederick Adler erupted in the press. The investigations revealed a fraud scheme that had been going on for over 5 years. False diagnoses, unnecessary treatments, improper medications, illegal kickbacks from suppliers. The financial damage to the families exceeded $2 million. Dr. Adler was arrested in a federal operation involving medical oversight bodies from 3 states. His arrest was widely televised, with images of him being led away in handcuffs. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for aggravated fraud, practicing medicine fraudulently, falsifying medical documents, and racketeering. His medical license was permanently revoked, and he was ordered to pay millions in damages to the families he had harmed. Beatrice's case was reviewed by the State Board of Nursing. With the new evidence presented by Richard's lawyers, her license was restored, and she received a settlement from the hospital for wrongful termination. But Beatrice decided not to return to work in hospitals. With Richard's support, she founded the Auntie B Foundation, a support center for families with children who had experienced trauma, a place where healing happened through music, play, affection, and genuine attention. Sophia and Helen, now 9 years old, became the foundation's first junior ambassadors. They helped welcome other children, taught them the songs Auntie B had sung to them, and shared their stories of recovery. 2 years after the foundation was created, at a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel, Sophia took the stage to speak to an audience of 400 people. "My name is Sophia, and this is my sister Helen. When our mommy went to heaven, we got very sad and we stopped talking, playing, and smiling. The doctors tried to help us with medicine and machines, but nothing worked." The girl paused, looked out at the audience, and continued, "Until one day a very special woman came to our house. She was just a cleaning lady, someone everyone thought was invisible. But she saw us. She sang to us, played with us, and made us remember that the world could still be beautiful." Helen joined her sister on stage. "Auntie B taught us that healing isn't about expensive medicine or equipment. It's about love. It's about someone truly caring about you." Sophia concluded, "An invisible woman saved us when all the experts had failed, and today, through the Auntie B Foundation, she continues to save other children every single day." The audience rose to their feet in a 5-minute standing ovation. In the front row, Richard was crying with emotion. Beside him, Beatrice held the photo of Gabriel she always carried in her purse. "Did you see that, Gabriel?" she whispered to the photo. "Your Auntie Bea is a hero to children again." That night, on the way home, Sophia asked, "Auntie B, do you think Mommy would be proud of us?" Beatrice looked at the two girls, so grown up, so strong, so full of life. "Sophia, my princess, I'm sure your mother looks down from heaven every day and smiles. You are the bravest, most caring girls I know." "And you, Auntie B, are you happy?" Beatrice looked out the car window, watching the illuminated New York City skyline pass by. She thought about the journey she had taken, from a dedicated nurse to a broken woman, from an invisible employee to the founder of a life-changing foundation. But mostly, she thought of Sophia and Helen, who had turned her pain into purpose, her loss into gain, her despair into love. "I'm happier than I ever imagined possible," she answered, hugging the two girls in the back seat. And as they drove through the bright city night, the three of them sang together the song that had started it all. Little fish, where do you go? I'm off to the pond to play with my friends." In the house on the Upper East Side, where years before the silence of grief had reigned, there now echoed music, laughter, and stories of hope. The home that was once broken by tragedy had become a symbol that true love always finds a way to heal. And in the girls' room, on a small shelf beside their beds, sat a photo: Sophia, Helen, and Beatrice in a smiling embrace. Beneath the photo, a small golden plaque read, "Family isn't defined by blood, but by the love we share." Richard looked at that photo every night before he went to sleep, thanking fate for bringing an invisible woman to save his visible family. Because sometimes the most important people in our lives arrive when we least expect them, from the most unlikely places, carrying gifts they don't even know they possess, and sometimes saving someone else is the only way we can save ourselves. Dear listeners, the story of Richard, Sophia, Helen, and Beatrice has come to an end, but we hope the emotion it brought will live on in your hearts. A narrative about how true love can be born from the deepest pain, about how justice may be slow but always arrives, and about how the people we need most appear just when we think all is lost. If this story touched your soul, if you were moved by the journey of this special family, please leave a like on this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every week we bring intense and true stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, showing that even in the most painful tragedies, there is always room for the rebirth of hope. Thank you for joining us on this journey of tears, resilience, and love. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, where a new story will stir your emotions and make you believe even more in the transformative power of human feelings.